Thank you. Before we dismiss, we have an update to share on our lead pastor search, which many of you have asked about, not only for the last number of weeks, but for over a year now. And I apologize for not having a lot to say, particularly even over the last 3 months since we had our annual meeting. We said this is what we're going to aim to accomplish in 2017. There just hasn't been much to report on, but there are a lot of things underneath the process really over the last 15, 16 months that I did want to share, primarily from our heart on behalf of the elders, to get us to this point where we do have an update to share today. And within that process, there's really three big themes that have stood out loud and clear as God has indeed been on the move. One has been rooted and baked in prayer. Two has been a spirit-led movement indeed through this entire body. And three would be obedience in response to that. And just to unpack that a little bit further, almost all of you were here last February when I had just announced something that was very uncomfortable that put us into a whole nother pivot and transition as a church body that frankly not just has been painful over the gap in between, the space in between, but has really been a decade in movement of uncertainty and really sifting sand beneath our feet. And that's not a fun place to be in for all of you. And certainly for your leadership and staff inclusive, that's been difficult. So rather than immediately say, well, here's how we're going to respond to that, we sat back and prayed and waited on the Lord, and many of you took the same posture. And I just wanted to say thank you and appreciating how powerful that has been for all of us to experience that prayer and indeed asking the Spirit to move before us and to intercede on our behalf, to lay out that path and show us indeed what's the direction, where do we go. And it took a good 6, 7, 8 months for us just to understand where indeed God wanted us to steer the direction for this body. And it was about last fall when we had a full day to really reserve to unpack, indeed, where are we at, or what are we doing here again, and where do we want to go to establish our roots and re-anchor ourselves as Fellowship Bible Church. Who are we? And really identifying ourselves as a Great Commission-minded church, really with great historical legacy and missions, with a tremendous connectivity through small groups, and a wonderful Sunday morning gathering that really established then the rhythm of gather, grow, and go. And those are things that we announced at the annual meeting, with indeed the core mission of it all, to make Christ known. That has indeed been the process, and with obedience, we have said, all right, even within this 2017 year, we want to move forward with that lead pastor search, of which we specifically allocated funds to do an external search for somebody else to go do that, to find somebody out wherever they may be, to come and join us within that framework. That was the plan, and that's what we presented in February. It was actually February 12th, almost 3 months ago to the day. And wouldn't you know it, the Spirit has actually moved in a little bit different direction than even that plan. And so as we had 3 different agencies give us quotes in the process, what would it look like to hire you to help build a pastoral search profile and then go execute that? And in the meantime, God birthed up and stirred up a candidate within our midst, within our community for that fact. And it was something that was unexpected for us, and interestingly and most surprisingly unexpected within our candidate, who indeed said, you know what, I think God is calling me into something different and a different season of ministry. And with wrestling through that on his own and even within the elders and the whole process since, this candidate emerged and said, here I am, send me. That candidate has a tremendous amount of vocational experience in ministry, over 20 years. That candidate is incredibly well qualified in both degrees and a doctorate of ministry. The candidate has actually preached to thousands across hundreds of countries across the globe. And wouldn't you know it, that's not a candidate that we had to reach out from the outside to bring in to join us. That candidate is us. And so with a tremendous amount of further prayer and discussion, I'm really excited to announce that candidate is Aaron Treadway. So with that being said, the elders have spent a decent amount of time not only unpacking that, but formally nominating Aaron to bring to you. Constitutionally, that's how it works, where within a number of weeks we will have a vote on that, But in the meantime, we are trying to set up a cadence to get to know Aaron more personally and more intimately as your lead pastor candidate. You will all receive a flyer just to know him a little bit better with not just his qualifications, but also a little more on his family with Jenny and Noah, which I know you hear quite a bit about from up here. But more importantly, some time to have some fireside chats or some desserts and coffees with Aaron, with the elders. We'll have some more communication both in letters and in video, just to not only unpack that further for yourselves, but anybody else that you'd like to share that with. So when it comes time to vote, we're ready, and through that process collectively as a church, move into the next season of ministry. The last thing I wanted to say, and I'm glad we sang this song, and I'm actually really glad Joe just said that we are more than conquerors in Christ. Just yesterday, I was meeting with a couple guys not far from right here, and a couple of you guys in here were with me at that point. And what was fascinating to hear, and I've not quite heard it in this sports analogy perspective before, but it really is the mindset of moving from a defensive posture, and defenses in any given game often is not what scores, but an offensive posture, one that we are more than conquerors in Christ. And that's what we want to put a stake in the sand today. We did it in February to make Christ known. We're going to lean into that incredibly hard and strong and aggressive and very purposeful so that everything we do is filtered around that, from leadership and the leadership structure to then the execution of everything we do in this church. But let's pivot and be on the offensive together. And so what I'm asking personally and passionately as you join us in that effort, that you will lean in, buy in, but more importantly, go all in for the sake of the gospel. That is a participation in the gospel. That is active, and that is dynamic, and that is what Christ has asked us to do, to be a Great Commission-minded church, that as we go and in our going, we will make him known and make disciples. We are going to stick around a little bit after the service if you want to unpack that more with the elders, including Aaron, your lead pastor candidate. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful Mother's Day.